Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And with us tonight is the author of our February book of the month, Dennis Depcik, and he has written Wouldn't It Be Something? Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dennis.
Thank you for having me. I'm so looking forward to this.
I've been looking forward to this since the Author Festival. When was that?
Some time ago, maybe
Yes.
May or something, was it?
Sometime.
I don't remember.
So I met Dan, just to give everyone the backstory. I went to an author fest out here in our area for a change. I got to meet authors. And I met Dennis at the book fair, at the author fest, and we talked, and he was nice enough to give me a copy of his book, and he signed it for me. And I read about 15 pages, and I text Diana, and first I text Diana and I said, we have to have him on for an interview. It's such, I love his story, and he's such a nice man. We have to interview him. Then I read about 15 pages, and I texted her. I said, we have to have him as a book of the month. So I knew back then, and then we immediately set it up for February because Valentine's Day. It was perfect. So I've been looking forward to this since whenever that was. I can't remember. Sometime in the summer.
Yeah, summer.
That was a while ago, yeah.
The months blend together. I don't.
Right. Well, when you have kids, everything blends together.
Mm-hmm. So, and full disclosure, this is ginger ale this week. Kind of lame, but I've been sick and I don't want to tempt fate.
Good for you. And I, full disclosure, I have apple cider. So we're not going to get too drunk tonight.
Oh, I'm the only one drinking. I've got the red wine. So.
Okay.
You guys hold it down for us, Diana. I know you can do it. I believe in you.
I can do it. I'm always up for a challenge.
So I guess to get us started, we've all read the book, we've read your letters, so we know how you and Maggie fell in love, but what was it like after, just having letters to know each other by? What was it like to actually date each other and be together?
Well, let me first, because I don't know how clear it is, let me first explain that. I know you know from the book and other people that Maggie was my sister-in-law's kid sister. She was 7 years younger than me. And I always looked at her as just a kid, just an insignificant kid. And it wasn't until she started to write me letters when she was in high school. Even at the beginning, I had no interest. I would read her letter, I would enjoy it when I was in the Army, and I would toss it in the garbage. I didn't save any of the early letters because she was just a kid. I could, she wrote a good letter, but that was about it. It wasn't until we started writing to each other on a regular basis that I began realizing that she's not just a kid. Actually, I came home unexpectedly one time for Christmas. I had to deliver some classified material to Washington, D.C. on Christmas Eve. And my commanding officer gave me an additional day and a half to go home and visit my family in Chicago. And my parents were having Christmas dinner that night, and Maggie's sister and my brother were going to be there. So I did not know that Maggie was also going to be there because she was living by herself at that time. And my mother invited her over to the house, not knowing that we weren't even having any we were just pen pals, that's all. And when she came over, my brother asked me if I would go to the hospital where Maggie was working because she was in an internship as a nurse, to pick her up. And that's the first time I saw Maggie as something more than just my sister-in-law's kid sister. When I saw her at the hospital interacting with the infants, the way she was so gentle with them and the way she would pick them up and just rock them, because all these kids were, it was not only a hospital, but an orphanage also. I was just amazed. I just kept watching her from the background, saying, "Oh my God, this is my sister-in-law's kid sister." And all through the dinner that evening, I just kept sneaking peeks at her, and I was in sort of a confused wonderment, saying to myself, "My God, she's not a kid." So it was after that that we started getting interested. I started getting interested in her, and we went for 13 months. When I was in Heidelberg and she was in Chicago, 13 months we were writing to each other, and we never saw each other, and we never spoke to each other during that entire 13-month period. It was only through our letters that we learned about our likes and our dislikes, our hopes and our dreams. It was through our letters that we came to know each other and fell in love. So when I came home for the first time after we were really getting interested in each other, I came home the following January. People asked me, "What was your reaction when you got off the plane?" Because she met me at the airport, which I did not expect. I told her not to meet me because I had no idea when my plane was going to be coming in. And she met me at the airport, and people said, "Why isn't that in your book? You know, what your reaction was." And I don't remember what my reaction was. At all. I mean, I honestly cannot remember how I reacted when I saw her standing there. But knowing who I am, I'm almost certain I showed no reaction whatsoever. And I walked up to her and thanked her very much for picking me up, gave her a little bit of a hug, and that was it. Because I was still very cautious about leading her on because I've never spent any time with her. No more. The only time I've ever spent with her alone was the 20 minutes that I drove her home from the hospital the following Christmas. So I didn't know if she was the same person in her letters that she was in person. So I was being very, very cautious because I knew from her sister that she had a crush on me. And I was like, I don't want to lead her on. I don't want to get her liking me and me to find out, even though I liked the Maggie I saw in her letters, if I found out I didn't like her, I didn't want to have to, break her heart. So I was very, very cautious about expressing any real interest in her. So I was very, very careful when she met me at the airport.
I love the story when you came home as a surprise and she ran into you at the airport. I think that one was my favorite.
Oh, that one when I came home in December at the hospital and everything? Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, that was, I did not, and at that point I wasn't interested in her. We were just pen pals. So I had no romantic interest in her whatsoever until I saw her at the hospital and began realizing that, oh my God, she's not just my sister-in-law's kid sister. She's really a lot more than she's not a kid. So that was good. So did that answer your question about when because I'll keep on talking about when I saw her.
Well, what was it like when you were able to start dating and actual? What was it like for you guys? Was it easy for you guys just to start dating right away?
Well, once I was home for that period of time where I realized she wasn't a kid, then we started writing to each other on a much more regular basis, and again, not seeing each other, not talking to each other, just writing to each other. It took 5 days for a letter to get there and back, so there was always that time gap. When I came back home in January, I was supposed to come home. I was hoping to come home in December of 1967, and I could not get the release from my commanding officer. He would not let me go home for Christmas because we were short staff at the courier station. So when I did get home, it was January already. And I was excited to see her because I knew from her letters that I really like this person. I don't know if she is who she is, but my God, I love the way she writes. So I was home for 2.5 days only. And that's when I really knew, oh my God, she's everything. She's everything ever, because I got to know her so well through her letters. Because our letters are not typical love letters in the sense that there's no honey bunnies and I can't wait to do this and that, It it was more just learning about each other, learning who we are, what we cared about, what was important to us. So I felt that I knew her very well by the time I got home and actually saw her. My only hope was that that's who she really was. And once I found out when I came home on that January that she indeed was who she was in the letters, my next letter to her said, "Oh my God, what have you done to me? I can't believe how I feel about you." And then I just could not stop thinking about her from that point on. Now, we did have other turning points after that where things almost ended. But once I fell for her, it was, I couldn't stop thinking about her. So when I finally was discharged from the Army in April of '68, I spent every single minute with her that I possibly. She only lived a block away from where my parents lived, and I still live with my parents because I was going to go to graduate school. But I was with her every single moment, and it was great. It was just fantastic. It was so comfortable because we knew each other so well.
I really liked in your letters to each other how you would both pull quotes from the previous letter and expand on your reply that you would break. I really like that you guys did that.
Yeah. Talking about previous letters, I don't know if I mentioned at the talk that you were at Michelle, about when I discovered the letters in the closet that Maggie had saved, and I never knew she saved them all these years. There were 119 letters in the box. They were not in chronological order at all. And I'm a very, I guess, anal person in that whenever I saved Maggie's letters, I kept them in the original envelope. And Maggie dated almost every single one of her letters. When I wrote a letter, I never put a date on it because I figured, why would you date a letter? Because you would date it if you think someone's going to save it. And who the hell wants to save my letters? So I never dated my letters. Well, Maggie never put anything back in their envelopes. She figured once you took something out of the envelope, why would you put it back in? It's just a waste of time. So when I went to that box and I found all these 119 letters and they were not I could see they weren't in chronological order just from the envelopes that I had saved. I didn't know which of my letters was a response to her letter. So I would have to read her letter. I would have to find something she said in her letter that I could make a reference to in my own letter. So she mentioned something about going to Colorado or something on a trip. I'd have to find a letter that I wrote that said something about Colorado. Then I knew that, okay, that must have come after the letter she wrote. So it was an extremely long process to get those letters in chronological order because I had to do that with every single letter of mine. But it worked. I did it, and the book flows from the beginning to the end. So.
How long after finding those letters did it take for you to decide to actually put this into a book?
Well, I'll tell you, once I read the letter where she said, wouldn't it be something if someday, 2 centuries from now, someone discovers our letters to each other and writes a novel about us? That's when I decided I'm doing this because I discovered the letters. They brought me so much closer to her. It took me a long time to read those letters because it was extremely difficult to do that because I found them only a month after she died. And first time I picked up one of her letters and saw her handwriting, I had to fold it back up, put it in the envelope, back in the box because it brought me too close to her too soon. I was not ready to be that close to her after she died. So it took me over 3 months to read all those letters. And it took me almost 3 years to write the book because I wasn't sure who would read a book about 2 people they don't even know. And for the longest time, I was like, I don't know. I'm not gonna. Who wants to read our letters? I don't know who wants to read letters between two people they don't even know. And I started messing around with it, and I gave it to a couple of people when I was just doing some rough drafts, and they said, "Oh my God, you got to put this into a book because she writes such beautiful letters." That's what I did. So it took me. It was very quick when I decided I was going to write it, but it took me 3 years to do it because besides arranging the letters and doing all that, I was learning about what it is to write a book. I was learning about what it is to publish a book. I joined a writers group. I was getting feedback from the different people in my group. So there was a long learning process that also went on. I was telling Michelle earlier, it took me almost 3 weeks to decide what kind of font I wanted to use because I wanted Maggie's letters to look like they were more free flowing and more, you know, italicized writing or making it look real nice. I wanted my letters to look, my type to be real rigid and tight because that's was my personality then. But that's the kind of, I would obsess over this stuff. And my kids would say, "Oh my God, Dad, Jesus, God Almighty, give it up, will you?" You know, but I just kept working at it. And it took me a long time. It took me almost 3 years to write it, even though I knew about 6 months after I found the letters that I was definitely going to write a book about it. I wrote it mostly because for my grandchildren, because I have 7 grandchildren and they will not know her. The oldest one, when she passed away, the oldest one was 5, and the others were way too young. One of them wasn't even born when she passed away, and I wanted them to know their grandmother because she was an amazing woman. Not only was she a beautiful writer, but she was an excellent pianist. She won first place in state competition for classical music when she was a junior and a sophomore and a junior in high school. And she was just a very gifted person, and they would not know her. I also dedicated the book to my children who don't see their mother as an 18, 19-year-old young woman in love. And after they read these letters, they were like, "Oh my God, I never thought of Mom that way." And the one who learned the most was me in reading her letters. I began to realize that I didn't really know her to the extent that I know her now after she passed away, because we got so caught up in family. I was telling Michelle earlier that in our first 5 years of marriage, we had a miscarriage and 4 children. So we didn't get to spend a lot of time with each other. And I spent reading those letters just opened up so much more of my understanding for her. And it enriched my life with her that I'm so glad that I took the time to write the book, because it's really been my salvation.
What did your children think when they were reading your letters? Like you mentioned that when they read Maggie's letters, that they never thought of her that way. But what did they think when they were reading yours?
They thought, "Oh my God, Dad, how the heck did Mom ever fall in love with you?" You didn't fall in love through your letters, because my letters are Maggie. Whenever she sent you a letter, she gave you a piece of her heart. My letters stumble from my head. My letters were always very pragmatic until I really fell for her. Then I was a lot more open. I never was a very open person when I was growing up. I actually went to a preparatory seminary and was thinking of becoming a priest early on in life. And when you're in that kind of an environment, they don't encourage a lot of romantic feelings, because you're supposed to be dedicating yourself to.
Oh, wait, I don't mean to cut you off. We have the microphone problem again. Hold on one second. Pause, everyone. It's very faint, like it was before.
Adjusting
Oh, you're coming back. Whatever you're doing is working.
I just moved about 3 inches closer to the microphone, but it's okay now.
I can't quite hear you.
Really?
We can hear you, but you're very, very faint.
Wow. How about if I bring the mic? Oh, I can't because it's attached to the. I won't be able to see me. I guess I gotta bring it right next to me. But there's another button on there. I'm afraid to press it. Maybe that'll make it go louder. Anything?
Well, I can hear you, but it's very softly.
Let me shut it off and turn it on again. See what happens.
There you are.
It's working now?
It's working now.
Oh my God. I'm going to hold my hand up over it.
It's like those old rabbit ears for televisions.
No, I will tell you that my kids are not, well, they don't dislike my letters, but next to Maggie's, they're nowhere near as expressive. And even my 2 daughters acted so differently with the letters. After I found them, I would sometimes I would read them to my daughters before I wrote the book. And one daughter would always say, read another one, read another one. And my other daughter would go, how many more are we going to read? So they were very different in their reaction to the whole thing. And the one daughter who wanted to read more and more is basically a carbon copy of Maggie. Very, very emotional, very sentimental, and so forth. My other daughter is more pragmatic and so forth. But yeah, I just love Maggie's letters. I just think she writes. She's a beautiful writer.
I think sometimes I had to stop and remind myself that she was only 18, 19 writing these letters.
She was 16. And then there was a whole year we didn't write to each other because every time I would send her a letter, I would write in such a way that she was her sister-in-law's kid sister. That's how the letter would come across. And she got kind of tired of that, and she stopped writing to me. So for about a 11-month period over that 3 years that we wrote, about 11 months of those, we weren't writing to each other. And then she started writing back to me when she said that the beauty of Bridgeport was she just wanted to say hello to me and wanted me to know that there was nothing personal involved in this. I just want to say that the beauty of Bridgeport is still alive and thinking of you. And it was from that letter on that we started writing to each other on a regular basis because I started seeing in her writing that, my God, she writes a really good letter. And she's very intelligent, and she's funny, and she's humble, and she's down to earth. And I just love everything about her letters.
Now, did she ever tease you for the way that you signed your letters? Because
yes. Oh my God. I don't know if she quite my kids thought I was nuts when they did it. It would be like, what did I do? It was affectionately plus, more than affectionately plus. Yeah,
affectionately, so many very variations on it.
You danced around that. You danced around the word love. Like, I don't think you could have danced around it anymore.
I could never say I love you. I never told a woman I loved her because that meant so much to me. To tell someone you love them means, for me, meant you wanted to be with them. They were the most important person in the world to you, and I was paranoid about saying I love you, and I know she wanted to hear that. And if you read the book, you know how it ended. When I finally did say I love you was when I was giving her an engagement ring, and she knew everything that meant. That meant I wanted her for my wife. I wanted her to be the mother of our children. I wanted I wanted to give my whole life to her, and that's what I love you meant to me. I never said I love you to any other woman besides her.
Yeah, because she was saying I love you, and then it was, oh, my light went out. I'm having there we go. And then, even though she was saying I love you, it was most affectionately, or I think my favorite is, again, very affectionately plus more.
Yeah. Well, I was trying. I once said to her, I wrote something about how a plant will grow with rain, and even if it gets a slight drizzle of rain, it'll keep it alive. And that was my way of trying to tell her, look at what I'm saying to you. Look at even these little things, you know, realize that I'm trying to tell you in my simple little way that you're meaning more and more to me. I remember when I told her the first time I said any kind of real feeling to her, I mentioned that I was growing fonder of her with every letter of hers that I sent, that I read. And I thought she'd just love that, because it's the first time I've ever mentioned an emotion to her. Well, she stopped writing to me at that point. I went 5 weeks without getting a response from her. And when I give my talks, I ask the women in the audience, how many women in this room would not put your life on hold because some guy you cared very much about was growing fonder of you? And they all look at me like, oh my God, is that what you said? But it was important. It was a big step for me. I was very careful about not leaving her on until I was absolutely certain. And then once I was certain, she wasn't. And it never entered my mind that, wait a minute, it's not just me making a decision here, it's her making a decision too. And even though she's been admitting all along in different ways how much she felt for me, when I came home that one January, when I realized that yes, this is the woman for me, she sent me a letter. But that weekend I was there, she basically said she didn't love me. I didn't do the little things that she expected me to do. And I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. Yeah, she has a say here too. You know, she's rejecting me. And that made me want her even more, to be honest with you.
Well, speaking of your, I mean, that was probably the scandalous moment for me when I was reading it. That was the moment when I was like, oh, was when you went home and she kept talking about this confession that she had. And I kept thinking, what is this? What could she possibly have? You know, what is it? And then she told you that she had been seeing someone else, and that he asked her to marry her. And when I was reading that, I went, Maggie, no.
Even though we were writing to each other on a very regular basis, and she was very open about some of her feelings, she didn't believe we had a chance. She didn't think that because I was a college graduate, she wasn't, because I was older and more mature in a sense. She didn't believe we had a chance. So we both dated. I dated girls in Germany and she dated boys here. And she met a guy from Great Lakes Naval Base.
Watch out for those Navy guys.
Sailors.
Who was crazy about her and gave her an engagement ring. And it was right after a time when her sister said to her, wait till Dennis comes home and finds out what you're really like. He won't want anything to do with you. Now, she was saying, well, that's like a big sister, you know, I think, trying to tease her. But Maggie took it very seriously because her grandmother died around that time and a lot of bad things were happening in her life. So she was ready to give up on me. And she met this guy and he offered her a ring and she took it. But I really don't believe she loved him, because she mentions in a couple other letters about how she has guys at home that help her move the furniture, help her do this, help her do that, but they're basically just friends. And that's who this guy was to her, although she had his ring, but I don't think she ever intended. He's a guy from New York. Now, if you go on Amazon and you look at the ratings of my book, every person rates it 5 stars, except one person. One person rates it 4 stars, and that's her ex-fiance. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Really?
Somebody's still a little bitter.
We rated us 4 stars, so that was good. You know, all he said in it was, I know this story, and there are some chronological errors in it or something. You know, he didn't say much about it, but he used to come and visit Maggie all the time. I mean, he lived in New York. We were married. We had our 4 children. He would come to the Chicago area to visit. She'd go out to dinner with him while I would stay home with the 4 kids. At least 3 times he did it. He's married now and has a child in New York. He emails with my daughter. He's a really nice guy. It just, I got lucky, you know, and she chose me over him. So, but he's still in the picture. So.
Wow, that's so funny that he rated your book.
I know. Well, I was so afraid for him to see the book, to be honest with you, because while she was engaged to him, she was writing some very tender letters to me. And I'm thinking, what's he going to think about her? If he reads this book knowing that he was engaged to her at the time, that she's writing these very tender letters telling me how much she cares for me. And I felt it would hurt him. So I never told him about the book. He found out about it and apparently got it off of Amazon or something and read it, and then had the comment that he had on Amazon. And I did talk to him on the phone because he helped me with some chronological stuff. You know, when did you get engaged with Maggie? When did she break up with you? Did she go to New York? Did you come here? Stuff like that. But yeah, he still writes to my daughter. He stopped writing to me, but he still writes to my daughter.
I always thought it was a little, whenever she mentioned New York, I thought it was a little strange that she never mentioned friends, that she was staying with friends or going out with friends, but I never thought anything about it.
There was one letter where she talks about staying at a friend's house, and that was his. He lived with his parents, and she mentions him, that her friend he was in the service, that he was stationed somewhere. He wasn't there when she was at his house. I don't know if that's true, but she did stay at his house with his parents when she was in New York. But nice guy, though.
Even though he gave you 4 stars.
Now, and I know that you do a lot of the talks in the area and to all the local libraries. What kind of feedback do you get from people? Have you found that they're able to connect to your story in their own personal ways?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, this is the most heartwarming experience I've had. I get such a wonderful response from people. Sometimes you don't know that. Sometimes I'm trying to read the audience. I was giving a talk in Skokie, Illinois, and in the very back row, there was about 40 people there, was an older woman. And she looked so bored with my presentation that I kept waiting for her to get up and walk out. And when it was over, she was the first one to raise her hand to ask a question. And she was an older woman, and she had a very old, beat up suitcase. And she started crying, saying that, I have a suitcase here, and it's filled with letters from my father and my grandfather, and he was in concentration camp, and she's crying. She's nobody in my family wants to read these letters, and that's why I came here. And so I spent some time with her, you know, looking at her letters. I had other people tell me things like, I have letters at home from my wife. She died 4 or 5 years ago. I've never been able to read those letters. After hearing your talk, I'm going home and I'm going to read those letters. And that makes me feel so good. I was telling you a little earlier, Michelle, that I belong to the Rotary Club of Buffalo Grove, and I gave a presentation today on my story. I had to cut my regular presentation in half. My regular presentation is an hour, but you only get a half an hour at the Rotary. And I was afraid to talk to the Rotary about my story because there's an old saying that a prophet is without honor in his own country. So I didn't think they would be that interested in it because they'd see me as something different. They don't see me as a public speaker. But I did my presentation and I ended up getting a standing ovation. And it just made me feel so great. They were so touched by the story. I had people coming over saying, my God, this was just beautiful. One of the main reasons I wrote the book was to honor Maggie. I wanted people who didn't know her to get to know her, and I wanted people who thought they knew her to get to know her better. My daughter is a registered nurse, and she wanted to give a copy of the book to a friend of hers who's a pediatric neurosurgeon. And I said, why do you want to give it to a pediatric neurosurgeon? They deal with heartache, they deal with death all the time. They have to keep their emotions tamped down. I don't think he's going to enjoy the book. She said, I'm giving it to him anyway. She gave it to him. He said, I'll read it when I go out to San Francisco for a conference. He flew out a couple days later. He called her when he got to San Francisco, and he said, Jennifer, I'm halfway through your father's book. You having problems with the microphone? Because I see a thing coming down. Yeah. Oh, you okay? He said, I'm halfway through your father's book, and I'm falling in love with your mother. And that made everything worthwhile, because that's what I want this book to be. I want my grandkids to know the grandmother they didn't know, and I want my kids to know a part of their mother that they never knew. And I want everybody who reads the book to fall in love with Maggie, because I did, and she was a wonderful, wonderful woman. So
I absolutely did after reading it. And after last week's show, we were talking about the dangers of the digital age, how nobody's writing letters anymore, and how we're going to lose this form of communication in the future. And it was actually funny. I didn't tell you about this, Michelle. I just got a bookcase, nice, beautiful, big bookcase installed in my office. And my husband and I were going through my books and putting books away, and we found it was just some little silly textbook thing about family genealogy. And I opened it up, and it wasn't a letter that was in there, but it was a few pages out of my grandmother's journal. And apparently my grandmother used to keep these, how do you put it? They weren't really true journals. They were like notebooks. Okay. And she'd write about big things that would happen. And so I had the pages for my wedding. She was,
wow.
Yeah, she was in her 80s. And I remember when I was a kid, because I think my grandmother had some bouts with depression, and I made her make 2 promises to me because she was going through one of those really sad times. And she would, she was like, oh, I'm not gonna live very long. And I was a kid. I was maybe 6 or 7. And I was like, Grandma, you got to live till I'm 16. You got to at least be around till I'm 16. And you have to be around, and you have to be there at my wedding. And she was like, all right, I promise you, I'll be around for those things. And sure enough, she was there for the wedding. My mother drove her from New York to California. And it was the whole, her whole trip. She wrote it all down. Every little thing that happened through her eyes.
Wow.
And, yeah, it was beautiful, and I got teary-eyed. And, I think, what are your thoughts on the possibility of losing out on this stuff?
Losing what?
Losing out on letters like this, letters from Maggie or from that woman.
I think it's unfortunate that letters are going to be gone eventually, because there's nothing in today's modern forms of communication that could duplicate what a letter does. Mm-hmm. Okay, talking my presentation, when I have one of Maggie's letters, to me, nobody could make the same soft curves of Maggie's S's or the gentle loops of her L. Her handwriting is unique, just like any handwritten letter or note you have from someone you care about is unique to that person. So when I hold one of Maggie's letters, I'm holding Maggie, because what's on that piece of paper came from her heart through her pen to the paper on which it's written. And I tell people, some computer genius could put together a program that when you type out a letter on the computer, it'll come out in cursive. And it might look exactly like Maggie's, but it won't be the same. because comes from a machine. What I have came from Maggie's heart, and it's now on a piece of paper. And I really feel when I'm holding it, I'm holding her, because out of the letters, all the letters that she sent, there's about 4 of them that she typed when she was at her office, and she says beautiful things in them, and I love what she says, but it's just not the same. It's just not the same. I was on a CBS Sunday morning show about letters, and they were talking about the loss of the handwritten letter, and it's a big loss, but it's also a lot of work. I mean, I have new people telling me now, oh, we should write letters to each other, and we'll write 1 or 2, and then that'll be it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot easier to do it on the computer, but I don't think it's not the same. You could save emails, you could save texts, you could save whatever. It's not the same as saving a handwritten letter. If you can read it, because some people with their handwriting is so horrible, you can't even read the damn thing. You know?
Oh God, the attorney I work for, he's awful. I tease him about it all the time. I tell him I have to speak another language. Honestly, his name is Dennis too, so I'm like, I'm fluent in Dennis.
Yeah. Well, if you saw, I know Michelle because she was at the presentation. Maggie wrote beautiful. I mean, she had beautiful handwriting, and mine wasn't bad for a guy. We both went to Catholic schools. We both learned from the nuns who would smack your fingers if you didn't make the L right and all that stuff. But it's very easy to read our letters because they're very readable. But I've seen other letters that I've gotten from people that are like, oh my God, I don't know what they're saying here. But the handwritten letter for me it's unfortunate that what's going to happen to it, but that's progress. So.
I think there's in some ways, I think the younger generations, we're starting to see, like my generation and younger, there's a revival of the things that our grandparents did, like almost like a backtrack on technology. Where you have like canning was a really big thing for a lot.
Okay.
And a lot of people are into that. And there's, the things that, for a while that we thought, okay, this is passe. Grandma did this. I'm not going to do this. It's not coming back into fashion. That people are really into it. And I'm hoping letters end up going that way too.
Well, I don't think it will, because I don't know what's going on in California, but they don't teach cursive here anymore. They teach it maybe 1 year when you're in grammar school somewhere. I don't know if it's 6th grade or 7th grade. And then that's it. And if you don't use it, you're not going to be able to do it. And they're not teaching it anymore. So.
And this is coming from somebody who, as much of a bookworm as I am, I hate cursive. I remember cursive. I remember being in the 3rd grade having to learn it, and I thought it was the most god-awful thing, and it would be so much better if we all just print it.
Well, that's what you see from most people who say they write letters. Actually, they print them. I was watching my granddaughter, who's 10, and she's going really fast on something. And I said, "Oh my God, I didn't know you wrote cursive." And it wasn't. It was printing, but she printed so fast and so clear. It was good. But there have been studies that have shown that cursive handwriting does something inside your brain that actually slows things down and actually makes you more creative and so forth. When I write, because I write a lot of short stories, now I'm working on a 2nd book too, but I write everything in cursive. And then I'll go back to the computer and do it. I just keep on writing and writing and writing and writing, and then I go back and start making changes.
I find I'm the same way. And someday, when I have kids, they're gonna find my writing journals, because I have to. I'm the kind of person I have to write everything out, handwrite it out.
Yeah. Oh, you do? Okay.
Onto the computer. It doesn't flow better if it's not that way for me. And I write, like, ironically enough, I write like my grandmother, where it's half in cursive, half print.
Yeah.
I can never conform to cursive. I was a rebel.
Well, like I say, I like writing cursive. I honestly, in all honesty, don't like writing letters that much anymore. I shouldn't say that, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot hard, and you always seem to make a mistake at the bottom of the page, and you got to get to start all over again, or do you just cross it out, or what? But that's the other hassle with handwriting. You can't just change it as quickly as you can on the computer. So.
Now, do you still have Mess the cat and Benji the octopus?
I have Benjamin Leonardo Augie. Yes.
Or Augie, I'm sorry.
I have him. He's downstairs on the little shelf above my television. I don't know what happened to Mess the cat. Just like I don't know what happened with a bunch of my letters. I think Maggie tossed a bunch of them out when she gave up on me at one point. Because there's about 10 letters of mine that are missing because I see her responding to them, but those letters aren't in the box. So she might have thrown Mess out at the same time, but I've never had Mess. But I did find Benjamin Leonardo Augie. Okay.
Well, Mess was trying to steal your girl anyway, so it's okay.
Yes, I love Mess. Although he had to walk backwards or something because he was Greek. I don't know what Maggie meant by that, but that was a comment. He must be Greek because he walks backwards.
Well, Greeks read backwards, so that maybe it has to do with that. So since they write backwards and read backwards, maybe there's a correlation between those two.
Well, that's why I used to love some of the comments that Maggie would make. If you read some of the poems in the book, Maggie always wrote about something emotional, love or feelings and stuff like that. I would write a poem about a leaf falling off of a tree and landing into a pond. It might be a nice poem, but mine were always about something happening in nature or words don't quite say what you think, what you want them to say. I would write a poem about that. And Maggie once said, I enjoy your poems, but I'm wondering, do you write what you feel or do you feel what you write? And I'm like, that's a good question, because I think I definitely feel what I write. I write it down and I try to make that feeling come out, whereas Maggie would feel it first and then write down what her feelings were. And I said, 17 years old, that's an astute observation on her part. She always surprised me with stuff like that. Because I don't know what her IQ was, but it was much higher than mine. So
we were talking about your poetry last week and how no one really, we were trying to figure out the last time that either of us got a poem in years. I don't really know. I mean, besides Heather was saying, besides the roses are red, violets are blue type of poems, I don't think anyone does poetry like that anymore.
I stopped writing poems for about 40 years. I mean, I shared some with Maggie. Those poems were not written to Maggie. They were poems that she wrote, poems that I wrote, that we shared with each other. After we got married and Maggie had 4 kids, she continued to write poetry. She wrote beautiful poems about each one of our children. She wrote a poem about me and all that stuff. And I didn't write anymore. I got too caught up in work and everything until after she passed away. Then I wrote quite a few poems after she passed away. And she would have been so proud if she saw those poems because they were my feelings. They were things that I was expressing about how I miss her and what her death meant to me. And I know if there is a heaven, I'm not, I don't know where you guys stand on that, but I think she's very proud of what I've done since then. And even some of the narrative I've written narratives about, just let me talk. Let me tell you about Maggie and the fact that she's dead, because I was finding after she had passed away, like happened with most people, they don't want to talk about death, and they're very uncomfortable. So I wrote about stuff like that, and very emotional. And I know she would have been like, "Damn, you do have that in you," She would have been surprised. But
what do you think she would have said if she to know that you published your letters like you guys, like she talked about?
I think her first reaction, if she saw everything that I was going through in preparation for that book, trying to get all these things in orders and all that, and to tell you how crazy I am, You guys read the book, and sometimes people say, "I loved your book. I couldn't put it down. I read it in one day," and that makes me feel good. But I'm like, you got to read it more closely, because there are so many lines in those letters, particularly from Maggie, that I think are absolutely beautiful. And I went through the trouble of going. This is where my kids think I'm nuts, and where Maggie would have said, "Stop it." I went through every one of the letters, and I broke down quotes of hers that I thought were really very astute, funny, tender, whatever. I broke them down into quotes about love, quotes about family, quote, whatever. There were about 10 different categories. I have 44 pages of quotes from our letters, because I think if you look more closely at the letters, you begin to appreciate them much more than just, when you read a book and you read it in one day, you got the gist of the whole story, but you don't capture the essence of the person, which I did when I basically studied the letters when I was writing my book. I studied them and I broke them down, and she'd be amazed. She'd be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did this." Because if we ever had any problem in our marriage, it was because I wasn't as tender as she would have liked. She was a very open person who liked to just sit on the couch and with my arm around her or holding her hand or something. And I always found that a little uncomfortable. And that was where we would have some of our biggest discussions about this has to change, And we went into some kind of, you're not Catholic or anything, either of you?
Yep.
There's a program called Marriage Encounter, where you go in if you're having some difficulties, and you end up actually end up work for us because you end up writing to each other, and it helps you understand each other better because of the topics that you're writing about. And she would just be proud of what she's seeing me do now. I know she wouldn't have expected it from me, because I'll tell you one thing else real fast. Outside the book, I never told Maggie I loved her while we were, in that stage. After she passed away, I constantly told her I loved her. I would go golfing every Sunday morning at about 6 o'clock. I teed off at 6 o'clock. I'd have to leave at 4:30 in the morning every Sunday during the summer. Maggie would not be up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Maggie and I always greeted each other with a hug and a kiss in the morning. Just a little peck on the cheek, whatever. Because we always wanted to start, even if we had an argument the night before, we always started off our day that way. So when I was going golfing, I would leave a note for her. Whatever it might be on a Post-it note, it might be on an envelope, it might be on a napkin, whatever was on the table. I'd leave her a note, so that when she got up, I would be there in some way. Mm-hmm. And the note might say, "I let the dog out, I'll pick up milk on the way home." Or it might say, just a simple note from a simple man, simply to say, "I love you." And there would be notes like that. And I'd come home and she'd go, "Oh my God, what a corny note that was." So I figured, okay, but I still would do it. I would do it. After she passed away, I was going through her dressers, and I found 2 boxes filled with every single note. There were over 250 notes in there. Even the ones about the dogs out picking up the milk. I would say something to her like I would bet we would gamble in golf, and I would write her a note. "I was hoping today that I would come home a big winner, but then I realized that I always come home a big winner because I come home to you." And she would go, "Oh my God," but she saved them home. So I did get better. I improved.
I think so.
Well, you've succeeded in putting pressure on my husband to write me a few more notes.
Well, yeah.
But and I do the same thing. He's not a very prolific writer, but I have the letter he wrote me from Christmas, and I have a couple letters that I really liked that I saved. So he does too sometimes.
Well, you women are good about that, good about saving things too, you know, and good about knowing when something happened. I just don't understand how you guys know exactly what a guy wore the day that he on your first date or whatever, you know. Guys are like, yeah. Like when I kept wondering after Maggie. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was like, we have a great memory. It's why we're always right.
Well, you are. Hey, I'm not going to argue with you. I have a wife who convinced me of that. Believe me. I would never argue with that. But yeah, it's good. It's a good thing to have that happen. But it gets lost. It gets lost. Like when I give my talk, I talk about how this is the Maggie I let fade with the daily rituals of marriage and raising 4 children. You don't get to know each other as closely. I remember one of her letters, Maggie said, she wanted us to have a longer relationship before we had kids so that we could get to know each other. Well, we had a miscarriage 2 months after we were married and 4 kids in the next 4 years. So that didn't happen. But we both wanted kids so badly that's what we wanted, and that's what we ended up having, and we were very, very, very happy with that. But I did miss some things about her that I learned in her letters that I didn't appreciate enough until after she was gone. And I actually read the letters. Oh my God. And I was not that much in touch with this aspect of life. So, but that happens. Not a happy note. But it happens.
And you mentioned earlier that you're working on a second book. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
This book, the book you read, goes up to the day we get married. And what I'm working on now is what happened after we were married. Because we had some issues. I mean, not issues. We had some challenges in our life. I mentioned earlier, our first child, she had the miscarriage, which was horrendous for Maggie because she wanted children so badly. I wrote a short story about that whole experience. And then my son, Michael, had a brain tumor, a benign brain tumor that they discovered at age 3. He went blind at age 3. And he wasn't supposed to live to be a teenager, but he ended up living till he was 22 years old. And there was a lot of changes and difficulties in our family because of dealing with that issue and then having the 3 other kids. So the second book is all about different things that happened in our life after we got married, some of the challenges we faced and how Maggie and I got through them. So it's basically the aftermath of our marriage. I've written about maybe 15 to 20 short stories, and I want to fit the idea of those notes in there, the little notes I was telling you about. So there's a lot of things I want to do with it, but I'm not sure where it's going yet. But like I say, I have about 15 or 20 short stories at this point.
Well, that's cool. It's still really neat and, useful stuff to have a very non-reality TV look at relationships and marriage and stuff. So very non-Bachelor. I know, Michelle, you like The Bachelor, so I'm not going to knock it.
I have to have my guilty pleasures.
Okay.
We all do. We all do.
Well, when you finish your second book, you'll have to come back and let us read that and talk to you about that some more.
Well, I'll send you some short stories because in all honesty, I don't know if I'll ever finish it. But because I don't have the same passion, the same drive that I had for that first book. That first book, I saw it as, for all the reasons I told you, for my grandchildren, for my children, because Maggie said, wouldn't it be something? The second book I'm writing, I'm getting a lot of really nice responses. I've won several writing contests for some of the short stories, but it's taking me longer because I'm babysitting, I'm doing a lot of other things. I'm not in the same place I was 7 years ago when Maggie passed away. So it's taken me a lot longer. But little by little, I'm getting there.
Well, you can send whatever you want to send us and we'll read it.
Well, because I do look for, what do they call them, alpha readers or beta readers or something?
Beta readers, yep.
Beta readers, yeah. I have a few of those, and they were giving me feedback. I belong to a writing group, and I get some very nice feedback from some of the stuff. So and I enjoy writing. It's just not the same drive that I had for the first book. That's my love. That was my. I love going around and talking about that whole experience, the whole letter writing.
Well, we're very glad that you made time to come, come talk to us about it. I know you had to get the computer set up and there was technical difficulties, but we got around them all.
Well,
and you're in my neck of the woods, so it's late. I'm tired.
Yeah, oh my God, 10:59.
9:59.
Our hours go by fast on Online Women in Words.
I'm sorry it's ending. Well, I'm glad you guys read the book, though. I am, because it's I love for people to hear that story, and I love for people to hopefully appreciate Maggie for the person she was, because I loved her so much.
Well, we're very happy that you shared it, because I loved it. I told you before, I got homesick for the letters coming home from the food store today, which sounds weird, but it's a good thing.
Yes, I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, and get some rest.
Absolutely.
Well, California, your day's just starting, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. It's only 9 o'clock here. Night's young. I'm gonna go out and party after this.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Hey, and we'll see you
everyone,
next time.
before we go, our March book, pick it up now. Lost Season of Love and Snow by Jennifer Lamb. We'll be reading that for the month of March.
Excellent.
And you have to get mine signed and mailed to me.
Yes. Yours will get signed and mailed to you March 3rd after the book festival.
Excellent. All right, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.